The wall doesn't even stop people from coming into this country. It does stop wildlife, and it splits habitats in half. We're only causing harm. We're not actually getting any benefits from this.
There's an enormous diversity of life on the planet, and every time we start to look at how that life works, we're surprised and made more knowledgeable about life in general.
Nature doesn't stop at the border. Jaguars, bears, and eagles still fly and roam on that side. That rain also falls on that side.
There is no option to go back and change anything that exists. If we're not allowed to retroactively go back and fix mistakes in the past, then we really should be working on getting it right in the future.
There is an amazing lack of perspective and an amazing picture of the border as a bloody, dirty place that we need to shut down. And in fact, it's a safe place. It's quite beautiful and is very treasured by many people.
I grew up here in southern Arizona, and I remember the time when I would go down towards the border to go quail hunting or what have you, and it was a completely different era. I mean, there was no real concern about the border per se.
It became a thing specifically related to conservation and environmental issues in 1997. There was a desire to control migrant traffic south of San Diego to a much greater extent than was perceived was happening. And Congress passed a provision mandating triple fencing for 13 miles south of San Diego. Nothing happened for a long time after that until after 9/11 happened. But that was really the beginning of this perception that somehow environmental laws were impeding border security.
One of the most problematic parts of what we see right now along the border and border policies is the passage of the Real ID Act, and specifically Section 102.
The first step was passing the Real ID Act in 2005. They passed a provision that authorized the Secretary of Homeland Security to waive all laws for construction of border barriers and associated infrastructure.
One of the problems with using the waiver from the Real ID Act is that there is no review of any process, that there is no scientific review, and for that reason, we don't have baseline information of what was then and what is now. There's no way to compare what has happened in the last 10 years with border infrastructure because we were never invited or allowed or integrated into a process where research could inform some of these processes.
There are washes all over the desert which only temporarily have water. And if you build a wall across it in the dry season, you might not see that as even an issue for your wall. However, you get a monsoon and the wash fills with water, and then all this debris barricades against it and pushes the wall out. And you can damage your infrastructure. At the same time, those washes are also the most important movement corridors for 90% of the animals. So that would have been a very clear place that we could have overlapped some of the science of species movement with some of the science of border wall construction.
Right now, even as we speak, the Border Patrol is reconstructing a portion of a wall here in southern Arizona because they understood after watching portions of the border wall falling down during floods that they really didn't know where and how to build it the first time around. That could have been prevented by following the laws, but now they're having to rebuild some of the wall so it doesn't fall down. And it sounds like we're going to duplicate that in high gear here. We're going to build a wall and then we're going to find out if that's effective or not and how it works.
It's really quite amazing that this is Arizona. It's all grassland out here. It's not a desert wasteland as a lot of people think. Then you have this metal structure in the middle of it just cutting everything in half. Doesn't seem like the best solution for this problem.
There is infrastructure there right now. There is pedestrian fencing, there's vehicle barriers, there's bollard fencing.
It's almost incredible that the U.S. Congress has repeatedly sought to address this problem by building a wall as opposed to addressing underlying issues that contribute to the problem. Well, the walls don't stop people. They go under them, they go over them, they go around them, they go over the top of them. There's no wall that will stop them from doing that.
So long as there is a demand for drugs in the United States, there is going to be traffic from Mexico, whether that wall is there or not. By building it the way that we're considering building it in the media right now, humans are still going to get across it, but everything else is going to be blocked. And that would be a shameful use of $23 billion of funding that could be used to improve our social, education, healthcare, and all the other things that are sort of falling apart.
Anytime you start breaking up populations of animals because they're migratory or their normal movements go from one place to another, it causes real problems with providing for the stewardship of those wildlife.
If a water source is on the other side of the wall that a species would normally be able to get to, if there's a wall there that they can't get to, it could physically be accessible to them, but then spatially not be because of this barrier. So on the micro scale, on the smaller scale, it restricts species from getting to important parts of their habitat.
Jaguars, ocelots, pronghorn, bighorn sheep, bison, these are important species that have lived in this region for many years, that have lived on both sides of the border, and that could be paying the ultimate price for this infrastructure.
We're not working the wall around natural features and habitat. It's just a direct line, so there's no consideration at all currently about realigning the wall in ways that support species movement.
The environmental consequences of this policy are not only the impermeable barriers. Border infrastructure includes all of the impermeable barriers, but also all of the roads that are open in public lands, all of the access roads, all of the forward operating bases, all of the high power lights and generators, all the patrols, all the ATVs, all the helicopters, all the checkpoints, all the helipads, all of that is border infrastructure, and all of that has an impact on the environment.
My hope with this project is that it opens up the line of communication between people, that they can see that this isn't a solution. This is just creating more problems for everyone involved.
There are ways that we could probably ensure good border security and maintain our natural resources and conserve our wildlife if we would take the time to plan for it and do it without making this a political football.
Instead of thinking about campaign promises, we really should be thinking about how we can involve more science. Science is a very important field in our world. I think not just the science of species movement, but the science of construction, of ensuring that the physics of the construction and the design of the wall actually incorporate water, which could then be easily used to incorporate animals. When you're talking about the spacing between the bars, we have to look at the skull distances of some other species and see what we're actually allowing to go through those, and then see what the species are on the ground that need the most attention.
I have no inclination to stop fighting the border wall altogether in areas where nobody who is considered a security expert thinks it makes any sense, and where it does tremendous damage to communities and to our public lands. I suspect some amount of wall is going to be built realistically, but I'm hoping that we can minimize it.
Generally, I think the Border Patrol is supported in this state. We know they have a tough job to do. It's a dangerous job to do. We might not all agree with the policies that are involved, but it's not the fault of the individual agents or their supervisors. It's mostly coming out of DC behind the Potomac River, where they don't know what it's like to work in the desert.
Some of the things that we see along the border now in terms of technology, there are just regular drones, remote towers that collect everything from thermal imagery, like the heat sensing photography, so they can see the heat of people going by. They've got a huge array of tools at their disposal, and a lot more coming up as technology advances that are going to be better for them to track the movement of people than a complete barrier.
I think one of the solutions is that we find political willingness to talk to each other, political willingness to address problems that are important and real, political willingness to have conversations that are constructive and not divisive. If we find common ground in working with the environment, then we will be able to see beyond these barriers and work with each other and address problems.
Politics, again, is not always straightforward and doesn't always work to the benefit of the species. So the right people know what's going on, but whether or not the people who make decisions are listening to them, I think is really the biggest problem.
All of these laws have already been waived, and that all laws in the entire country can be waived right now, and that's not right.
No one is sure what is being proposed. It's being invented as we move along, and we're going to pay for it, courtesy of the United States Congress.
I hope more people can work together to realize that this isn't a solution, that there are better ways to do this. We need to act now before it's too late.